My name is Níall Fitzgerald. I'm Head of Ethics and Governance here in Chartered Accountants Ireland, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Banks, who is a partner in PwC's Risk Assurance Services, and he will lead the delivery of internal audit, governance and risk management services to clients. Andy has worked across industry with a strong focus on financial services. He's also got extensive advisory experience within the areas of corporate governance, fraud, internal control and risk management. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm just going to stop share here, Andy, and I'm going to go straight in to asking you the first question, which is, how, Andy, have your clients so far found the response by regulators to the COVID-19 crisis in these challenging times?
Yep. Look, I think it's thanks for that, Níall, and I think it'd be fair to say certainly I think the regulators have been taken by surprise around the kind of the speed and dynamic nature of the COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in, and have had to invoke their own contingency plans as well. But look, I think that being said, we've certainly seen a lot of activity from the regulators, and the overarching message seems to be an element of pragmatism and a practical approach that, look, we're all in this together and we'll do whatever it takes to get us out the other side of it. And some recent examples of that, particularly from a financial reporting perspective, I'm sure you've seen the recent FRC, FCA, PRA guidance around extending the financial reporting timelines for listed entities by a couple of months. And that's also been adopted here in Ireland with IASA and ESMA also pushing out the timeline. So I think, those extensions certainly give companies the opportunity to, take the necessary time and action to prepare appropriate disclosures and address some of the current practical challenges that we're facing. So overall, I think reasonably positive to date anyway.
So the forbearance measures have been welcomed, and it's giving people breathing space to recalculate their expectations and forecasts and deal with all those regulatory matters. Very good. So, Andy, you have an awful lot of dealing with a lot of organisations, specifically with boards, audit committee, internal audit and the risk functions. Chartered Accountants Ireland, we've been engaging as well with a lot of boards and organisations, getting advice from them to others on what they should be doing. Can I be more specific, perhaps, with you, given your experience? What should audit committees specifically be doing right now? Okay,
I think certainly from an audit committee perspective, there's a potential that people could feel overburdened by the responsibility that rests on them at this point in time. There's absolutely a lot of challenges that they're facing. I think I maybe focus on two key areas for discussion this afternoon, Níall. I think certainly from a financial reporting perspective, which is a key aspect of any audit committee role to provide that management and oversight around financial reporting. We're certainly seeing a number of audit committees having to face kind of new or difficult challenges arising from the current environment. So I'm sure you're seeing this yourself in terms of potential impairments, kind of revenue recognition, additional judgments and estimates being required, but also things like viability and going concern that probably weren't really featuring on people's agendas 2 or 3 months ago, to be honest. And I think if I looked at all those areas, they're technically challenging in their own right. So I think the counsel we've been given to audit committees is, firstly try and come up with that list of key areas and concerns that you need to address. Have a look across your own teams and across committee to make sure that we've the skills and experience to deal with these areas. And also we found it very important to have an early engagement. So certainly the clients we are working with, that early engagement with audit committee, finance teams, etc., has been quite helpful to make sure that people are appropriately aligned in terms of dealing with these matters. I suppose if I looked at the broader risk management agenda, which also is a very important focus for any audit committee, and I guess the kind of looking at the likes of internal control and risk management and ensuring we've appropriate systems and structures in place there. It's absolutely likely that there's been a change in terms of the business operating environment. We're doing this call remotely. Yeah. Teams are working from home. That's undoubtedly impacting on the risk profile of the organisation. So we certainly found it very helpful for audit committees to sort of undertake a reassessment of the impact of these changes, consider how that's going to impact the operations of the organisation. What impact is that going to have on the control structure? And also think quite carefully around the fraud implications as well, and trying to have a forensic look at that, because certainly we'd see a heightened level of fraud activity in the current environment as well. So
that seems to be concerning a lot of people, Andy, is the risk of fraud, specifically with a lot of teams working remotely and they're not used to it with cybersecurity and data protection and all that. That's a heightened risk, obviously, in the crisis.
Absolutely, we'd see it being a heightened risk, and unfortunately, as you know yourself, Níall, fraudsters look for opportunity, and there's certainly opportunity in the current environment. We've engaged with a number of clients who are kind of concerned, particularly around some of their core kind of payment processes or payroll processes. How do we operate these remotely, and have we looked at the additional risk profile to make sure that the controls that we would have previously relied on are perhaps not as effective as they would have been. So they're looking to get reassurance that they have appropriate controls in place to mitigate some of the enhanced fraud risks that we're currently seeing in the current environment. So I was on a call with some US colleagues last night, Níall, and one of the things they said that they've seen organizations over there do is really just come up with a list of what they see the critical controls being across the organization, and making sure that both management and audit committee have clear line of sight around those controls, and that they continue to operate effectively in the current environment.
And Andy, does internal audit team have a key role to play here in providing the board and the management assurance around the implementation of perhaps the COVID-19 response, the crisis response of the organization?
Sorry, absolutely, Níall. I think there's a really important role for internal audit to play. If you looked at the internal audit functions, dealing with risks, processes, controls, that's the inherent skill set that the teams have. That's what they do on a day-to-day basis, and their second nature. So I think absolutely, in terms of understanding the response to the COVID crisis, we'd see a number of internal audit teams addressing those areas. But also, I suppose from communications I've had with others, typically there's kind of 3 or 4 key areas that I certainly see internal audit functions focusing on at the moment. The first one being, I suppose, what I'd call a redirection of their expertise to deal with some of the COVID challenges. And that's materializing in 2 ways. A reassessment of the existing plan to see, is that still current? Is it valid? What do we need to postpone? And what do we need to bring forward, just in face of the emerging risks that we're seeing? But also, a number of functions are looking to deploy resources differently to provide perspective on the changing risk profile. So maybe just give you a couple of examples. I certainly know one team who are now, they actually sit in some of the governance forums that the organisation has and provide a real-time input into the decision-making process. And I know another team where, when COVID broke, they drew up a skills matrix across the team, pushed that out to the business and said, look, we've good skills and experience across the team. We're happy to help deal with some of the emerging risks that are applying. So seeing, I suppose, a number of roles being undertaken by internal audit, and a real focus in terms of changing the delivery model that would have been previously employed to add additional value to the organisation.
It's still very critical, and it's enhanced, as you said, by the skills and expertise within internal audit teams and what they can add to the decision-making process there. Very good. Andy, what is your view? What do you expect in the internal audit and risk management functions post-pandemic? What can we expect? Dramatic changes, or is it going to be business as normal once we all get out of our houses and back to work?
Listen, I think there'll be change, right? The extent, probably a couple of things to say, Níall. I think any function that hasn't fully embraced the digital agenda, I think they'll be doing that fairly quickly, to be honest. Look, I know certainly, within PwC, we were fortunate. We jumped on the digital bandwagon a couple of years ago, and it's been really beneficial in terms of being able to deal with the current situation. I think if others haven't, then they'll certainly be embracing that very, very quickly. And I know from chatting to folks, I was talking about different delivery models in place, right? If you looked at the traditional internal audit approach, there's a lot of detailed planning, execution, and reporting. People are moving away from that in the current environment and looking to different methods of delivering their services. So I do think there'll be an opportunity to learn the lessons from this and probably to deploy more effective and more agile audits to meet the emerging risks that organizations are facing. So hopefully something positive will come out of it.
On that positive note, Andy Banks, Partner in Risk Assurance Services in PwC, thank you for taking the time to share those insights and expertise with us today. And keep safe and wish you well.
Likewise, Neil. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.